You know what makes every outfit look better? The right bra from Third Love. Their bras make it easy to ultimate cleavage, a smooth look, or even stop your shirt buttons from pulling. They make over 60 sizes, including half cups you won't find anywhere else, so you'll find your perfect fit. Third Love solves bra problems, or what they call broblems. Real women test every style they make. Comfort and support are guaranteed. So stop settling for bad bras. You deserve better. Get your problem solved today. Save $15 on your first order with code podcast15 at thirdlove.com.
Sometime in the early 80s, REO Speedwagon's airplane made an unannounced, middle-of-the-night landing.
This is my friend Kyle MacLachlan, the star of Twin Peaks. And he's telling me about how he discovered a real-life Twin Peaks in rural North Carolina, not far from where he filmed Blue Velvet.
What was on the plane was copious amounts of drugs coming in from South America. Supposedly, Pablo Escobar went looking for other spots, quiet, out-of-the-way places to bring in his cocaine.
My name is Joshua Davis, and I'm an investigative reporter. Kyle and I talk all the time about the strange things we come across, but nothing was quite as strange as what we found in Varnamtown, North Carolina.
There's crooked cops, brother against brother. Everyone's got a story to tell, but does the truth even exist? Welcome to Varnamtown.
Varnamtown is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 350 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. Look at that. We made it to 350.
350. It's a milestone.
It is.
And we have a big episode in store for everyone. But first, let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout-outs. We had Catherine Christian.
Hey, Catherine.
KV.
What's going on, KV?
Babette.
Hey, Babette.
Mark and Angela.
Hey, M&A.
Catherine Vollebeck.
Well, what's going on, Catherine?
Lisa Thrasher jumped out at our highest level.
There's Thrasher.
Melissa.
Hey, Melissa.
Jay Sledge.
Oh, I appreciate that, Jay.
Rianne Hitchings.
Well, what's going on, Hitchings?
Tasha Minardi jumped out at our highest level.
Oh, you're awesome, Tasha.
Kimberly Harris.
Hey, Harris.
Shar jumped out at our highest level.
This is a cool name. Char.
And last but not least, Thomas Rogers.
Well, thanks, Thomas.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Laura Sparkman.
Well, thank you, Laura.
Yeah, appreciate that continued support. And then we had a couple of great PayPal donations from Terry Lalio.
Hey, Terry.
And Maxine Rebecca Kretz.
Well, I appreciate that, MRK.
Thank you to everyone. Gibbs, right now we have an episode out on TCAT where we're talking about the murder of Dan Markel. And this is such a fascinating web of people who are involved in this murder or thought to have been involved in this murder. And it's kind of a still ongoing but solved case is the best way to describe it.
You just wonder why people do what they do.
Yeah. I mean, to have your in-laws involved in your murder, okay, makes you question, made me question my relationship with my in-laws.
Is that why you're not going over there for dinner anymore?
That's exactly why. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this 350th episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We are taking on the Dyatlov Pass incident.
So we're going to drink some vodka while we do this?
We might have to. We might have to because it's about to get really, really cold. In February 1959, a group of 9 hikers died in a remote region of Russia's Ural Mountains. Something caused them to cut their way out of their tent and flee into a snowstorm without proper clothing and gear. While there are many theories about what happened, some more plausible than others, the mystery that became known as the Dyatlov Pass incident remains unexplained. And like I said, this is a really big unsolved case. And it's a really big unsolved mystery.
It really is.
23-year-old Igor Dyatlov was described as a tinkerer, inventor, and wilderness devotee by the New Yorker.
You know, I love the wilderness,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't love the wilderness when it's freezing.
So you like 70-degree wilderness?
Yeah.
Not Russia, Ural mountain wilderness?
No.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. But I was kind of looking at the description of this guy and thinking, okay, this is a lot like Gibby. You're a tinkerer, you're a quasi-inventor, and a wilderness devotee.
As long as it's not freezing out.
Igor was a fifth-year radio engineering student at Yekaterinburg's Polytechnic Institute, abbreviated as UPI. It was called Sverdlovsk before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, obviously, we're in Russia here. There's going to be city names, people's names that are hard to pronounce. I will do my best.
You always do.
We tried to look a lot of them up. Some we could find, some we couldn't find.
Not easy.
It wasn't easy to find all of them. It was said that this was one of the best technical universities in the country. Graduates were often top engineers who worked in nuclear power, the weapons industry, or military engineering.
It's impressive.
Igor led multiple wilderness trips during his time at the university. So it seemed to me, and I think it was clear from the research, that this was like his biggest passion outside of inventing. He loved to be outside, and he loved to take people on his adventures.
It's good to have passion.
And you're a very passionate man about a great many number of things.
Many passionate things.
Yes. In late 1958, Igor began planning a winter expedition. He planned a 16-day ski trip in the Ural Mountains, the north to south mountain range dividing western Russia from Siberia. It's also the border between Europe and Asia. The trip covered 350 miles in total, which included 200 miles of skiing. Igor planned a route never taken by any Russian before.
Adventurous.
Daring. I've never skied a day in my life. I've talked about it before. So I don't plan to go down one hill. I'm certainly not taking on a trip that involves 200 miles of it.
I'm pretty sure after that one voicemail we got today, you're not going to ski ever.
No, we did get a voicemail about skiing on our TCAT episode. But you hear Siberia. What comes to mind?
Frigid temperature.
Desolate. Just someplace you do not want to be. Now, I don't know that for a fact. I've never been there, but that's what gets conjured up in my mind.
I'm thinking what's his name? Bear Grylls?
Bear Grylls?
He's probably like, yeah,
I don't even go there.
I don't even go there, man.
According to the New Yorker, the mountains were gentle and rounded, their barren slopes rising from a vast boreal forest of birch and fir. The challenge wouldn't be rugged terrain, but brutally cold temperatures, deep snow, and high winds. You know what I do not like? Brutally cold temperatures, deep snow, and high winds.
That's like the trifecta of what you don't like.
No, I don't like it at all. Igor submitted a proposal to the university's sports club. It was approved, which meant he could start recruiting people for the expedition. Now, I get it. You want to go on this adventure. But when you start recruiting people, how are you selling this thing? Hey, we're going to go and do something nobody or no Russians ever done before. It's only 350 miles and 200 of it will be skiing.
Well, maybe the sports club was like, go ahead and approve it. He'll never get anybody to go on this thing.
That's what I'm thinking. Igor recruited his classmate, 22-year-old Zeneta Kolmogorova, and 7 other students and recent graduates. All right, so you got 8 people. That's 8 more than I thought he would get.
Yeah.
All of the members of the expedition were considered the elite of the Soviet youth, per the New Yorker, and were experienced winter campers and cross-country skiers.
Well, you better be elite.
Well, and you better be very experienced, right? In wilderness, winter, camping, and you better be a really good skier. Another group member was 23-year-old Yuri Krivonishenko, who went by the name Georgie. He graduated from UPI 2 years earlier and worked as an engineer at a nuclear complex. Georgie was known for his jokes, songs, and mandolin playing. And I know you love to play the mandolin, Gibbs. I've never understood it.
There's a certain technique.
Well, there's a technique to playing any instrument, but just pick up a guitar. I'm not sure what the mandolin really serves. Two more recent graduates were 23-year-old Rustim Slobodin and 23-year-old Nikolai Thibaut Renault, who was of French descent. The other students in the group were 22-year-old Yuri Yudin, 21-year-old Yuri Doroshenko, and 24-year-old Alexander Kolovatov. Zaneta and Yuri Doroshenko were previously in a romantic relationship. She fell in love with him during an expedition when he chased off a brown bear. She felt nervous about going on this trip with him because they were no longer together. And you know what's a great way to win a woman's affection?
Chase off a brown bear?
Yeah. I mean, you are really proving yourself as the protector. Nothing bad will happen to you on my watch.
Because I'll chase those bears away.
The youngest group member was 20-year-old Ludmila Dobinin, an econ major and track athlete. Ludmila was a strong and brave young woman. She was once accidentally shot by a hunter and had to hike 50 miles back to civilization.
That's pretty tough.
It's pretty tough to get 50 miles away from civilization based on what we're used to.
Right.
Now, obviously, places in Russia, you can, I think, easily get 50 miles away from civilization, but you are pretty strong and brave. Regardless of sex, if you get shot and then have to make it 50 miles back to get help. A few days before the expedition was scheduled to start, the UPI added a new member to the group, 37-year-old Simon Zolotarov, a World War II veteran and sports instructor.
I mean, it does sound like they have the A-team.
Well, as far as people who know what the heck they're doing, yeah, the one thing that does jump out at me is that Simon is quite a bit older than the rest of the group at 27. The others seem to be in their early 20s.
But what I'm not hearing is a lot of novice people.
No, I think these are people who are physically fit, have experience, camping, skiing, all of that type of stuff. But again, if you didn't have it, why would you even think about going on this trip? On January 23rd, 1959, the group of 10 departed from the city of Sverdlovsk. They boarded a sleeper train. Some group members hid under the seats so that they wouldn't have to buy tickets. Remember the old days of the drive-in movie?
Oh, yeah.
Where you'd see how many people you could pile into your trunk.
I've been in that trunk before.
So they wouldn't have to buy a ticket. They were all in good spirits and they were having a fun time, goofing off before their trip. Georgie was actually detained by the police for playing his mandolin and pretending to panhandle at one of the train stations on their journey.
Yeah, I think if you're going to pretend that you're panhandling, probably not a smart thing to do in front of the Russian army.
Oh, I was thinking
police.
Just playing the mandolin would get you detained.
Some people love the mandolin playing.
Now watch, I'm making jokes about the mandolin and I'm going to have a whole bunch of listeners who play the mandolin. They're going to angrily write into me.
You're going to get yourself in trouble.
I am. A lot of what we know about the group's activities comes from their shared journal and personal journals. At least 5 of them had cameras to document their journey. And I'm sure we'll be talking about it as we go through the episode, but it's one of the very intriguing aspects of this case is that there are quite a few pictures from this adventure, some of them taken just before the tragedy. BBC published one of Ludmila's diary entries. She wrote, "In the train, we all sang songs, accompanied by a mandolin. Then out of the blue, this really drunk guy came up to our boys and accused them of stealing a bottle of vodka. He demanded it back and threatened to punch them in the teeth. But he couldn't prove anything, and eventually he got lost. We sang and sang, and no one even noticed how we slipped into a discussion about love and kisses in particular."
Just a regular night on the train, singing some songs and talking about love and kisses. Sounds like your type of trip.
One I've taken many a time. On January 25th, the group reached a remote town in Evedale, which used to house one of Stalin's prison camps. They rode a truck to a village called Visay and spent the night there. Zenaida and Igor sent letters home from the local post office. This was their last stop before they reached the area now known as Dyatlov Pass. The group rode a truck to a logging base called the 41st Settlement. From there, they were on their own.
That's when things get real.
Well, and for me, and my way of thinking, that's when things would have gotten scary. Okay, we're on a train. That's great. We're drinking, singing, laughing, talking about kissing. All of that's fine and dandy. We hit a settlement. We ride in a truck. And then all of a sudden, they're like, get out of the truck. You're on your own.
I mean, all the comforts of civilization are gone.
Zenaida wrote in her journal, per the BBC, "It turns out that this is our last day of civilization and the last chance me and Ludmila had to sleep in beds. Tonight, we're going to be in a tent." On January 28th, Yuri Yudin was forced to drop out of the trip due to a flare-up of sciatica.
Well, you know what? When you sleep on irregular surfaces, it's probably going to flare it up.
Like the ground?
Like the ground.
And that can really jack a person up. He left the group before they started the most difficult part of their journey. Their goal was to reach Mount Otorden. Many believe that the name means "don't go there" in the Mansi language. The Mansi are indigenous people who have inhabited the region for hundreds of years.
Well, you know who would know the area the best then? The Mansi.
Oh, absolutely. A Mansi forest warden told the BBC that Otorden actually means mountain with swirling winds. You know where I don't want to go?
Up a mountain with swirling winds?
Yeah, exactly. Eventually, the part of the mountains that the skiers were traveling to, but did not reach, was named Dyatlov Pass. The group planned to return to the village of Visay. On February 12th, Igor was supposed to send a telegram to the university sports club to let them know they returned safely. Based on photos taken by the group, we know that they pitched their tent on the mountain on February 1st, 1959. One of Zenaida's last diary entries reads, "All day long, we followed the river. At night, we'll camp on a Mansi trail. I burned my mittens and Yuri's jacket at the campfire. He cursed me a lot."
Well, maybe he wanted to have that jacket to keep warm.
Well, I'm assuming he did. And my thought is, this must have been an accident, right? She wasn't burning her mittens on purpose.
Yeah, I'm assuming it had to be an accident.
Because those are something you would really want to have with you. The UPI Sports Club didn't receive a telegram on the scheduled date. Sports club officials assumed the group was off schedule. There were reports of a heavy snowstorm in the Ural Mountains at this time. And obviously, we're talking about 1959 here. The methods of communication were limited, and there really were no methods of tracking people in real time. My thought is, if you're going on such an adventurous trip, pretty easy to get off schedule. Maybe you're not able to travel as much or as far one day as you were scheduled to. So I don't think it's unreasonable for these people to have thought, okay, it's going to take them an extra day or two longer.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they had smartphones and GPS, satellite devices and satellite phones to help them out, right? I mean, they were going off old school maps.
After a few days of no communication from anyone in the group, the family started calling the university and their local bureau of the Communist Party. The search effort started on February 20th, and there were multiple search parties. Some were made up of student volunteers, some were guards from the prison camp in Evedale, or local police, some were Mansi hunters, and the Russian military sent planes and helicopters to assist with the search.
Sounds like all hands on.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty quick and massive response. It turned out that it was the students who made a disturbing discovery. On February 25th, they found ski tracks. On the 26th, they found a tent above the tree line on a remote mountain called Height 1079. The Mansi people called it Dead Mountain. Okay, you know the last place I want to go to? Dead Mountain.
There's a lot of last places you don't want to be.
Yeah. But no one was found inside the tent. The tent had partially collapsed and was buried by snow. Once the search party uncovered it, they saw that it was slashed in several places. Okay, so it's a discovery. You know, I use the word disturbing. It's not gruesome. It's not deadly. But you wouldn't look at it and say, well, this is a good sign.
Yeah, I think you have to have some major concerns.
Because if they've gone somewhere else, why would they have willingly left their tent? That wouldn't make a lot of sense. And why is the tent all slashed up? All of the belongings inside were neatly organized. The group left their boots, axes, and equipment on either side of the tent entrance. They left food out as if they were about to eat a meal. They had a stack of wood for heating, and they left behind their clothes, cameras, and journals.
This is more disturbing.
Yeah, I think once you have that information, then it's a little more dire. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Hey, TCAT fans, whether you love true crime or comedies, celebrity interviews, news, or even motivational speakers, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue, right? And guess what? Now you can call the shots on your auto insurance too. Enter the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. The Name Your Price tool puts you in charge of your auto insurance by working just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance. Then they'll show you a variety of coverages that fit within your budget, giving you options. Now that's something that you'll want to press play on. It's easy to start a quote, and you'll be able to choose the best option for you fast. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive Insurance. Quote today at Progressive.com to try the Name Your Price tool for yourself and join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. The search party found distinct footprints 100 feet downhill. The footprints looked like they belonged to 8 or 9 people who walked towards the trees. The prints showed that some of the group were wearing stockings and some were barefoot. A searcher later testified that they could see the toe impressions in the snow. One person wore a single ski boot. All right. I mean, what do you make of that if you're in this search party? Because I'm sure you're all bundled up. There's snow on the ground. It's cold. Who in the hell is just out walking in their bare feet through the snow willingly?
At this point, I don't think you're thinking that, right? I think you're wondering, why did these people flee their tent so quick? One person was able to get one boot on. Some had socks on. Some didn't have any socks on. What the heck was going on?
Part of the mystery. The search party followed the prints downhill for 600 to 700 yards, but they disappeared near the tree line. On February 27th, the search teams found the bodies of Georgy Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko under a cedar tree at the edge of the woods. They were dressed in nothing but their underwear and were lying next to a fire that had gone out. About 12 to 15 feet up the tree, the team could see broken branches. They found torn clothing and pieces of skin on the tree trunk.
As if they climbed up to see where they were at, maybe?
Or to get away from something. I mean, we just don't know. But I think my first question is, why were they dressed in nothing but their underwear? And I think if you're trying to climb a tree in nothing but your underwear in that type of weather, okay, maybe you're going to leave some skin behind. Later in the day, another search party discovered the bodies of Igor Dyatlov and Zenaida Kolmogorova. It seemed like they were trying to get back to their tent when they died. Igor had no shoes on, and it looked like Zenaida was trying to scramble up the hill. The 4 bodies were sent for autopsies, and the search efforts continued. The medical examiner found that Gregory had blackened fingers and third-degree burns on one shin and one foot. A piece of flesh was found in his mouth. He had bitten off a piece of skin on his right knuckle.
Makes you wonder what was going on.
Which part? The part where he bit off part of his knuckle, or the whole thing?
The whole thing.
Because I'm struggling to figure anything out at this point. And I think that's exactly why this has been such a intriguing mystery for so many years. Yuri had burned hair on the side of his head, and one of his socks was charred. All of the bodies had bruises, abrasions, scratches, and cuts. Rustem Slobodin's body was found on March 5th. He was also found on the slope leading to the tent. He had a sock on one foot and a felt booty on the other. He suffered a minor skull fracture. At this point, the authorities launched a homicide investigation led by prosecutor Lev Ivanov. And I don't know how you couldn't think that this was anything other than a homicide. Now, we have done stories where people have gotten lost or, they succumbed to the element. But it's kind of hard to think that was the case here. You have the slashed up tent. You have these people seemingly bolting out without even putting on clothes or boots, socks in some cases. And then one man, has a skull fracture. It's not like they were just all found out in full clothing. Then you might think, well, there was a bad snowstorm, they got caught in it, and they died of, hypothermia or so, something like that. That's not what we're talking about here.
No.
The Manzi people became suspects because they were the only other people living in this region. Manzi Forest Warden Valery Anyamov told the BBC, Soviet investigators were convinced that we Manzi must have killed them. So many people around here were arrested, and a woman from another village who is no longer with us used to say that the secret police tortured them. I don't know if that is true, but they were certainly interrogated for weeks.
I'm sure they were. Somebody wanted answers.
Now, whether it's true or not, it's always been thought, Gibbs, that the Soviets didn't really have a lot of limits to some of their questioning techniques.
They had some questionable tactics.
Some brutal tactics, I think, in some cases. Not to say that other countries didn't or haven't. The Manzi people were eventually ruled out as suspects. And even though the government accused them of murder, they still agreed to help with the search efforts.
That says something.
Yeah, I think it does. Meanwhile, investigators performed toxicology tests on the bodies, took witness testimony, and made diagrams and maps of the scene. The police flew out the tent and the items found inside and created a reconstruction inside the station. Because they're definitely not going to want to be standing out there trying to figure it out.
In the cold and the wind and the snow?
Yeah, and all that. Let's reconstruct this thing in a warm environment so we can try to figure it out. A seamstress who happened to be at the station for a uniform fitting pointed out that the slashes were made from inside the tent. And that's a very interesting observation.
Yeah, you can tell by the way the fibers are, if it was cut inside or outside. I'm actually surprised that the police investigators didn't figure that part out.
Yeah, it didn't dawn on them. And maybe they didn't think about it because that's not where their mind was going. It was that someone had attacked the tent from the outside. But with this knowledge, it kind of meant that something disturbed or frightened the group so much that maybe they cut their way out of the tent and ran outside into the blizzard-like weather with hardly any clothing on.
And if this wasn't so horrible, you would think, did they take some bad mushrooms or something?
Yeah, some type of drug that made them hallucinate, something like that, right? I'm also thinking Yeti here. The Yeti is entering my mind.
You've always got Yeti on your mind.
I do. It was said that the temperatures were around 20 below zero at that time. And we mentioned it, right? All these people were experienced campers. It wasn't like they didn't know that they would die if they went outside for extended periods of time without proper clothing and gear.
So whatever the reason was, outweighed the risk.
Had to have. It had to have been so life-threatening that they were willing to risk their life out in the cold.
The only time I ever wanted to get out of a tent so bad was that time you and I went camping, and that night you ate that whole can of beans, and I couldn't be in the tent anymore. It was just too bad.
And we've never been back to Brokeback Mountain.
Nor will we.
In early May, a Mansi hunter and his dog discovered a snow den in the woods about 250 feet from the cedar tree where two bodies were found in late February. The snow den consisted of a floor of branches and a deep hole in the snow. Pieces of clothing were found inside the den, including a pair of black sweats with the right leg cut off and the left half of a woman's sweater. And that's one of the things about this case. It seems like every detail is strange.
Bizarre.
Why would the right leg of some sweatpants be cut off? And why would only the left half of a woman's sweater be there? Now, I understand if you're stuck out in the cold, okay, you're making this what they're calling a snow den and you're trying to trap your body heat inside of it. I've seen that on survival shows. A search team found a piece of flesh inside the den. They brought in excavating equipment and found the four missing hikers lying together on a rocky stream bed. They had been buried by at least 10 feet of snow. 10 feet.
That's a lot of snow.
But I guess if you have a blizzard, you could pile up 10 feet pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm thinking up in that area, it probably didn't take very long.
But again, we're talking about a piece of flesh. Piece of flesh on the tree. Piece of flesh inside this den, a piece of flesh inside one of the victims' mouths. Now, my first thought is that in that kind of cold, wet environment, could your flesh come off pretty easily? Could it get stuck and kind of rip off?
Are you thinking like the Christmas story when the guy licks the pole and he can't get his tongue off?
Well, first of all, he doesn't lick it. He just sticks his tongue to the pole. But yes, that same type of theory where it's so cold, it sticks to your skin. Then if you move, maybe some of the flesh rips off. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of a reasoning for all this flesh that they're finding. All four suffered severe injuries. Nikolai T-Boot Brynol had pieces of bone inside his brain from a severe skull fracture.
Some type of fall or other, right?
Or something else. Simon and Ludmila had crushed chests with multiple broken ribs. Ludmila had a massive hemorrhage in the right ventricle of her heart. The medical examiner described it as similar to the impact of a fast-moving car. Alexander Kolovatov had a wound behind his ear, and his neck was twisted.
Almost sounds like maybe they got hit by like an avalanche or something.
Or a Yeti. I mean, it sounds like injuries that were made by something powerful. Now, that could have been nature, like in the form of an avalanche or, maybe, I don't know, are there winds high enough out there that would throw trees like in a hurricane or a tornado? I don't know. But when you say that these are similar to getting hit by a fast moving car, well, what out in the wilderness is going to do that?
Besides your Yeti?
besides the Yeti?
Bear, maybe, right?
Maybe. Simon's eyes were missing, and Ludmilla was missing her eyes, tongue, and part of her upper lip.
Okay.
And there are some photos out there of some of the victims. They're very graphic. They're disturbing.
Now, could you say that maybe these individuals died before the other two, and the other two decided to cut away or use the eyes and part of the lip as food?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about like an alive situation.
Yeah.
That seems strange to me because they're not all that far from the tent, right?
If they can
get there. Is that what you're saying?
They can get there, but first can they still see it? Do they know where it's at?
Well, yeah, I don't know all of that. It just seems like to me, it might be easier to get back to the tent area than it would be to eat some of these people for food. And I'm not sure that these are the spots that you would cut to eat. I'm kind of thinking maybe more likely this might have been animals.
Maybe.
But I don't know. I'm not ruling anything out.
And if you were too injured to try to get to the tent and you couldn't really travel and that body's right there, I mean.
Yeah, but would you eat somebody's eyes? Would that be the first thing that you would think about?
Not to be graphic, but maybe it's an easier thing to take from a body with your bare hands.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I don't know. The medical examiner noted that none of the bodies had external penetrating wounds. Some of the victims were wearing clothing taken from or cut off another person's body.
Well, that makes sense. If the other person passed, it's freezing cold.
You're going to take their clothes.
Yeah, they no longer need them.
Yes. Laboratory testing found that several items emitted unnaturally high levels of radiation. Okay, so we don't have enough in the way of strangeness. We now have to add in radiation.
Yeah, so was there some type of testing going on in that area?
I mean, we're going to get into all the theories, but authorities set up a makeshift morgue in the town of Evdale, which was surrounded by KGB officers who refused to let anyone in without authorization. A large barrel of alcohol was delivered before the autopsies, which may have been used to protect investigators from radiation. An expert later testified that the radiation levels were likely much higher at one point, but decreased because the bodies were exposed to running water for several months. Despite the major discovery, prosecutor Lev Ivanov abruptly ended the investigation on May 28, 1959. This was because his only job was to determine whether a crime had been committed. He found that homicide was not a factor in this case. He was not obligated to figure out what happened to the hikers if no crime occurred. He wrote in his report, according to the New Yorker, it should be concluded that the cause of the hikers' demise was an overwhelming force, which they were not able to overcome.
Okay, an overwhelming force of?
We don't know. Bear, Yeti, radiation, raiding party. I mean, in response to the tragedy, the director of the UPI and the chairman of the sports club were fired, as well as the local Communist Party secretary, the chairman of 2 workers' unions, and a union inspector.
Man, they cleaned house.
The investigative files were sealed, and the area surrounding Dead Mountain was closed off to skiers and hikers for many years. So we have this unbelievable tragedy. 9 people died.
Right.
We've got a lot of strange factors, or we have a lot of strange things that were found. It's like this massive search, and then all of a sudden, just kind of nothing. We're done. We're closing it off. Investigators eventually had to throw out the tent because of mold, but the victims' families wanted answers. They wrote to officials, including Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, to ask for a thorough investigation, but this never happened. The official Soviet conclusion was that the group died because of the spontaneous power of nature, according to Reuters.
It was like saying Or there was an avalanche or something similar to that.
Yes.
But what set off that avalanche? Nature?
Testing. I know you're going back to the radiation, some kind of testing, but the spontaneous power of nature is very, very broad.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're leaving a lot for interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. The Russian Prosecutor General's office listed 75 official theories about what happened. 75.
That's a lot.
Different theories. In 1990, former prosecutor Lev Ivanov published an article claiming he was pressured not to include his opinion on what happened in his 1959 report. In his article, The Enigma of the Fireballs, he wrote that the group was killed by heat rays or balls of fire associated with UFOs, according to the New Yorker. So that was his opinion. There's no way that he could have known that for a fact.
You know what else puts out heat waves and balls of fire?
Nuclear testing. He claimed that in his original examination of the mountain, he found trees with strange burn marks. This confirmed that some kind of heat ray, say, or some powerful force whose nature is completely unknown, to us at least, acted selectively on specific objects. So he's deep down the rabbit hole of UFO.
He is.
He cited the final photograph in Georgie's camera, which showed flares and streaks of light on a black background. The New Yorker, however, noted that this is common at the end of a film roll. The Dyatlov Pass incident became one of the most high-profile mysteries of the Soviet era. People became even more interested when the case files were declassified. In 2000, the victims' families established the Dyatlov Group Memorial Foundation to honor their memory and find the truth. The president of the foundation, Yuri Kuntsevich, leads tours to the Dyatlov Pass area. He told the New Yorker that Russians typically believe in two theories: that the skiers died because they accidentally discovered an area where the government was testing secret weapons, or that they were killed by mercenaries who were likely American spies.
Oh, got to throw the Americans in there.
Always. To be fair, though, Americans for years have always thrown the Soviets in there.
Yeah.
Let's be fair about that. Now, he has said he believes in the first theory, and so do the families. They believe that the group was injured by a missile launch and had to flee their tent. They froze to death or were killed by military members. So I think this is going back to what you were kind of alluding to. You know, this radiation, heat.
I mean, it does explain, or helps explain, some of the burn marks on some of the victims.
Yes, because I did think that was interesting. I mean, if you were able to light a fire, it is possible that you were so cold, you were trying to get your skin so close to the fire that you wouldn't even know you were burning it. But I don't know that they were able to light a fire.
Yeah, I'm thinking, how did they even start a fire?
Yeah, I don't know. They did have fire starting material at the tent. That part was noted. But my thought is, if you're not putting on clothes or shoes, you're not grabbing fire starter stuff.
No.
Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor, died in 2013. Before his death, he said he believed his former companions were removed from their tent at gunpoint and were killed, and that it was possible Ludmilla had her tongue cut out because she was the most outspoken of the group. Supporters of this theory cite claims from residents who said they saw flashes of light or moving balls of fire in the area where the bodies were found. Sources don't specify, though, how far away these residents were from the tent site. In 2008, a 3-foot-long piece of metal was discovered in the area where the bodies were found. The metal came from a Soviet ballistic missile. The Dyatlov Foundation currently has this piece of metal in its possession. And it's thought by many that this could possibly explain why some of the items recovered were highly radioactive. Ivanov's superior within the Prosecutor General's office spoke to a newspaper in 2013 and said it was suspicious that they were asked to test recovered items for radiation. He asked his superiors why it was relevant to the case. The deputy prosecutor general met with them, but he avoided questions about weapons testing and allegedly ordered them to tell the public that the deaths were accidental. Now, what casts doubt on the secret weapons testing theory is the lack of footprint evidence of additional people at the scene. There's also no evidence of a secret weapons base in the area or evidence of an accidental missile explosion.
Well, if it's a secret weapon, wouldn't it be a secret base?
Yeah, but you would think by now it would have been disclosed, uncovered, something. I mean, when you're talking about footprints, okay, if you are in blizzard conditions, would those footprints eventually get covered up? And I would say, yeah, they would. But remember, they found footprints of the victims.
It's true. So it makes you wonder then.
How, let's say members of the military would cover up their footprints if that's, who was involved.
So that brings the aliens back in.
Yeah, because there'd be no footprints.
Because they can float.
And it probably also rules out a Yeti.
Yeah, I think Yetis would have big footprints.
Big footprints. Another theory revolves around Semyon Zolotarov, the older man who joined the group at the last minute. One Russian book claims that he and two other group members were KGB agents who were on an assignment to meet with CIA operatives in the mountains. According to this theory, they were supposed to offer radioactively contaminated clothing samples as bait, but the CIA agents discovered the truth, killed the group, and staged the strange scene.
Possible.
Well, there are a lot of things that are possible, right? That's why there are so many theories floating around. But again, if you have CIA agents out there, no footprints, they figured out a way to cover them up. My other thought is, if you're in the KGB, why do you need to be with this group?
It's a cover.
It's a cover, but do you need a cover to be out, to meet someone out in the middle of nowhere? That I thought was a little strange. Now, it is possible that Simon was involved with the KGB because it's been said that his World War II service record has holes and inconsistencies, per the New Yorker. Many doubt that CIA operatives would choose such a remote, extreme place for a rendezvous point.
Well, that's the exact point that you made.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that there was a lot of clandestine stuff going down in 1959. The KGB, the CIA, they were doing stuff that I'm sure we'll never know about. But did they need to meet, if they were going to meet, at a place called Dead Mountain when the weather was, negative 20 degrees? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think they would have chose a better meeting point.
Let's meet in Paris and have a cup of coffee and a croissant. A 2013 book by filmmaker Donnie Eicher suggests that high winds created infrasound, which are vibrations below the human hearing range. This caused the group to become so terrified that they fled the tent. As noted by the New Yorker, it's unlikely that all 9 of them would be so afraid of infrasound that they ran outside to their deaths.
Well, if they can't hear it, but they can feel the vibrations, is that what he's saying? I'm just wondering if they could feel the vibrations, did they think it was an avalanche? And I think if you felt like an avalanche was coming your way, then I think you would flee pretty quick out of that tent.
Yeah, I get that thinking. I've never heard the term infrasound, so I don't know anything about it. But here's the thing. Are you saying that the avalanche is just going to hit the tent? It's not going to hit the area that you run towards, or they were just so scared they had no idea?
Yeah, I'm thinking they were just so scared they weren't even sure which way to go.
All right. I don't know if that theory has legs or not, but I get what you're saying. Another book suggests that the Manzi killed the group because they trespassed on sacred land. But game warden Valery Anyamov dismissed this, telling the BBC, If any of our people had been involved in that crime, they would have thrown us all into prison because it was a cruel time. In those days, people were executed by firing squad without investigation or trial.
Well, they were interviewed for 2 weeks.
Yeah, extensively interrogated, I assume. The BBC also spoke to Anyamov's mother, Sanka. She claimed that one day in February 1959, she was outside gathering firewood when she saw something in the sky. She said, "We were coming back from the forest and we could see the village ahead of us. This bright, burning object appeared. It was wider at the front and narrower at the back with a tail, and there were sparks flying off it." So I don't know if that plays more into the UFO theories or into some type of secret weapon testing theories. You know, if you think about it, there were many people out in Nevada and places like that that thought they saw UFOs when it really turned out that we were just secretly testing some kind of new plane or new weapon.
Which could have been the same.
Could have been.
Here. Yeah.
Now that could explain, maybe what this woman saw, but how does it explain the death of 9 people? And I think that's where people struggle so much with this case. You can kind of take the road down, any of these theories, but at a certain point, it seems as though there are questions that you just can't answer.
Yeah, I think you wondered the first event that scared them, put them out in the elements, and then the elements killed them from exposure to the frigid temperatures, the lack of food. But what scared them so much that they had to run away from the tent so quickly in their underwear?
Yeah. I mean, that is the big question. And I don't know how long they were out there before they died. Was it long enough that they were even, starving to death? They needed food that badly.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to survive in your skivvies in -20 weather very long at all. Not long enough to get hungry. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's probably least of your concern.
It would be. One of the most out there theories is that the group was attacked by a Yeti. Evidence of this theory, if you want to call it evidence, comes from T-Boot Brynol's photographs. And specifically his final photo, which shows a dark figure with no face in the snow. However, it's commonly accepted that this is just a blurry photo of one of the group members.
Or is it?
Well, we are talking about a camera from 1959.
Yeah.
And, photographic technology being what it was.
But I know you like the Yeti possibility.
I like the Yeti possibility, but again, going down that theory road, you're kind of stopped in your tracks because I think there would be footprints. There would be some type of evidence. And you'd have to believe that Yetis exist. There's that hurdle too.
Well, it's a pretty big hurdle.
It is. One of the most plausible theories is that the group was killed by an avalanche that hit their tent while they were sleeping, which forced them to cut their way out and escape into the forest. In February 2019, the victims' relatives were able to get the case reopened. Prosecutor Andrei Kurikov organized a winter expedition to the site. His team took measurements and photos, surveyed the land, and did a variety of experiments. They tried to establish the exact location of the tent and determined, based on historical data, that the temperatures were more extreme than originally thought. It was determined that the winds were up to 65 miles per hour, and the temperatures were actually around -30 rather than -20.
I'm thinking -20, -30. It's going to feel the same to me
at that point.
If I'm just in my boxers,
it's just going to kill you a little bit quicker.
Yeah,
I would think. Now, Kurikov dismissed 72 of the 75 official theories. And obviously, we can't talk about all 75 official theories. It would take too long. He said in his announcement, as quoted by the New Yorker, a large class of these 75 versions are conspiracy theories, alleging that the authorities were somehow involved in the incident, we've already proved that this is absolutely false. So that left 3 official theories: an avalanche, a hurricane, or a slab of snow sliding over the tent. So a slab of snow is like a mini avalanche, I guess, or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
In July 2020, the prosecutor held a press conference where he announced that the slab avalanche theory was the definitive explanation for what happened. He declared, formally, this is it. The case is closed. According to Forbes, slab avalanches are responsible for almost 90% of avalanche deaths. They're formed by a sliding sheet of hard, compacted snow. Well, I thought that's what an avalanche was.
Well, I think the difference between a slab avalanche and an avalanche is the amount of snow.
Yeah, it's just it's a little concentrated slab, right? That's what I'm thinking.
Right.
Instead of like the whole
mountainside.
The whole mountainside. When the group was setting up camp on February 1st, 1959, the snow was 6 feet deep. The party took 2 photos at 5 p.m. The photos show that they cut into the snow to form a hollow to pitch their tent. They picked a spot where a mountain peak sheltered them from the wind. Avalanches most commonly occur on slopes greater than 30 degrees, but they can happen at a lower angle. Many researchers calculated that the tent was pitched on a 15-degree slope. However, prosecutor Kuryakov's experts found that the tent was actually between 23 and 26 degrees, which could be steep enough for avalanche formation in some cases. As reported by Forbes, the slope just above the campsite was 22 to 30 degrees, and the mountain terrain was rugged, with large boulders jutting out from the ground, which helped decrease the likelihood of an avalanche. However, according to slab avalanche theory, a snow slab detached from the slope above them and hit their tent, which could explain their injuries and why they had to cut their way out of the tent. They might have feared that a full-scale avalanche was coming, so they fled to the woods for safety. There was no evidence of an avalanche ever occurring. The group members likely tried to make their way back to the tent, but they couldn't find their way because of the darkness and the snowstorm, so they sheltered in the woods and died that night. During the new investigation, the prosecutor conducted a test where he blindfolded a man and a woman and led them 90 feet downhill from a tent. They were unable to find their way back, and this test did not include blizzard conditions.
Yeah, no doubt. I believe that they probably couldn't find their way back.
But is it the same? I don't know if I could get from here to the bathroom blindfolded.
You have problems even when you don't have a blindfold on.
But I just don't know if it's the exact same test. But maybe it is. You know, the conditions, dark, blizzard, it would be very tough to find your way. But could you use tracks maybe that you made coming?
I think you also have to take in consideration that their anxiety level probably had to be off the chart, that they're not thinking rationally. But they were experienced hikers, experienced skiers, experienced outdoors people.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like they would have figured out a way to find the tent 90 feet away from them, if that's how far it was, if that's how far they ran. I don't know, man. I'm telling you, I at the end of this, it's just a completely mesmerizing mystery. It just is. The Dyatlov Group Memorial Foundation did not accept the official findings of the investigation. The foundation sent a letter to the prosecutor general declaring that the skiers died from the atmospheric release of a powerful toxic substance from secret weapons testing. The prosecutor general's office never released an official report, and the foundation has pushed for another investigation. The New Yorker reported that the group's skill and experience may have been what killed them. They did not pitch their tent in a safe location, but their response to the snow slab was correct. They evacuated the tent and got to a place where they would be safe from an avalanche. They sheltered in the woods, and apparently they did start a fire. Some of them dug a snow cave. If they did not know avalanche safety procedures, it's possible they would have stayed near their tent and might have survived. So it's an interesting angle, from the New Yorker. They were so experienced, they knew what to do in the case of an avalanche. But if it wasn't a real avalanche, if it was only a slab avalanche,
right,
then they would have been better off and would have more likely survived if they would have stayed by the tent. They could have got their clothes. They could have started a fire there. In January 2021, 2 Swiss engineers published a peer-reviewed paper corroborating the slab avalanche theory. Their paper was published in the journal Communications, Earth, and Environment.
That's a great journal.
It is. It is. I know you look forward to it every month, along with your highlights magazine.
Yeah, it's good reads.
Their paper explained that the snow slab did not release immediately when the group cut into it to make a hollow for their tent. Over a period of several hours, additional snow caused the slab to release. The Swiss researchers believe the snow slab caused the severe injuries found on some of the victims. According to their paper, it's believed that the group went downhill together and sheltered under the cedar tree where they built a fire. Someone attempted to climb the cedar tree to break off branches, which is why the tree had pieces of skin on it. The fire, though, was not enough to keep them warm. The 2 group members with the least amount of clothing died first. They were burned because they got too close to the fire in an effort to get warm. It's possible that Georgie bit his finger because he was delirious from hypothermia. The survivors stole their clothing for themselves, and the group split up at some point. 3 of them tried to get back to the tent and froze to death. 4 decided to build a snow den in a ravine, but they picked a spot above a stream that never freezes, which made a deep tunnel in the snow. Their digging caused the roof of the tunnel to collapse, which buried them in snow. The pressure of the snow caused their injuries. The damage to their faces was likely caused by small scavenging animals and decomposition. Now, the radiation, they said, could possibly be explained by the fact that the mantles used in camp lanterns at that time contained small amounts of a radioactive element. Additionally, the expedition took place after the world's 3rd worst nuclear accident at the Mayak nuclear complex, when a tank of radioactive waste exploded and sent up a 200-mile-long plume. It was said that Georgie worked at the facility and helped with cleanup efforts, and another skier came from a contaminated village.
I mean, we're finally hearing some plausible explanations.
Yeah, I think as far as theories go, this is the most plausible of them all, I would say. UFOs, Yetis, secret weapons testing that then caused the military to come in and kill all these people. The evidence just doesn't seem to support those. Now, it's kind of hard to find evidence to support the UFO theory. I get that.
Or the Yeti.
Well, no, you could find tracks.
Oh, if you believe in Yetis.
Yes. If you believed in Yetis, you would expect to see big Yeti footprints in the snow.
Should we tell the listeners that you have a Yeti tattoo?
No.
Oh, okay.
We should not tell them that. And then they even offer up an explanation for the, radioactivity. Now, whether, any of it's true or not, we don't know. There's no way for us to know.
But it sounds believable.
It sounds more believable than most of the other theories. That's for sure. Lead journal author Johann Gahm told Live Science, "We do not claim to have solved the Dyatlov Pass mystery, as no one survived to tell the story. But we show the plausibility of the avalanche hypothesis for the first time." And I like the way that he put it. He's basically saying, we can't say for certain this is how it happened. But what we are doing is showing that it is plausible, that it did happen this way. Now, critics of the slab avalanche theory have 4 counter arguments. According to Johann Gahm, a lack of evidence of a full-scale avalanche, the long gap between when the hikers cut into the snow and the time they left the tent, the shallow slope, and their injuries. Gom and his co-author, Alexander Puzrin, used historical records to recreate the environment on the night of the incident. They simulated a slab avalanche using data that showed the slope was not as shallow as previously thought, which meant a small snowslide could have passed over the tent. There would be little to no evidence because it would be covered up by new snow. They theorized that katabatic winds, defined as fast-flowing funnels of air propelled by the force of gravity, per the Smithsonian Magazine, moved the snow down the mountain and caused it to fall. Okay, that is a term I've never heard, but I don't know a lot about avalanches, skiing, or negative 30-degree weather.
And you even dated a weather lady back in the day.
Back in the day. Puzrin said in an interview with New Scientist, it was like somebody coming and shoveling the snow from one place and putting it on the slope above the tent. New Scientist also spoke to Jim McElwain, a geohazards expert at England's Durham University. He said that the research does not explain why the group ran outside without clothing on. He said, if you're in that type of harsh environment, it's suicide to leave shelter without your clothes on. For people to do that, they must have been terrified by something. I assume that one of the most likely things is that one of them went crazy for some reason. I can't understand why else they would have behaved in that way unless they were trying to flee from someone who's been tracking them. Gom told Live Science in his separate interview, when the hikers decided to go to the forest, they took care of their injured friends. No one was left behind. I think it's a great story of courage and friendship in the face of a brutal force of nature. Now, to be honest with you, I get what both of these individuals are saying. So let's imagine that a little slab avalanche came down on the tent.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't imagine it would be a good thing. Some people would be injured. Could it cause skull fractures and things like that? I don't know. If it was enough snow, I'm assuming it could. But then I look at what McElwain is saying. If you're an experienced camper / hiker, outdoors person, you know you have to get out of that tent. But would you get out? Would you leave without putting hardly any clothes on? Now, is the thought that none of these people left in just their skivvies, right? Some people's clothes were taken after they died, maybe, but they obviously didn't take enough to survive.
Yeah, and I don't think you would run out barefoot.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe some did run out with no shirt, no pants.
But what had to be so scary or so alarming that they ran off like that? You know, I mean, it could have been the fact that they were concerned that there was going to be a larger avalanche coming.
And I understand that fear. But to me, that's a maybe. And the certainty is if I go out in this weather without the proper clothes, I am going to die.
Yeah.
The avalanche is a could be. And that's, to me, the biggest thing that doesn't fit.
Yeah. So then what makes you run?
If it's not the threat of an avalanche,
Yeah.
What makes you run so scared that you don't care whether you have clothes on or not? And I don't know the answer.
And I don't think you could say it's somebody in your party since they were all found together.
Well, yeah, the one person went crazy theory that he put forward, there would have to be more to it. They had a weapon, they had a knife, they were threatening everybody. But again, like you said, they were all found together. So that doesn't seem to make any sense.
So then you think maybe it's a combination of a secret weapon that also caused a slope avalanche, adds to radiation. You know, when you see something or hear something that you've never seen before, that's going to be enough to scare you. You know, you see...
Like a Yeti? You see a Yeti?
Or a Yeti. If you see a Yeti or you see some type of explosion...
But there would be evidence of that explosion. unless it was somehow covered up. And I don't think we can discount that angle. The fact that the government maybe was able to cover up something that they didn't want the public or the rest of the world to know about.
Yeah, I think they could have covered it up. And I think also large amounts of snow does a wonder
To cover things up.
I mean, they did find a piece of metal that appeared to be from the military. So
I don't know. I don't know, man. As we wrap this one up, I don't think I've ever been as stymied. I mean, there are a lot of cases where I really have no clue. This one, 75 theories, all of which we didn't talk about, obviously, but even the theories that are most plausible, they seem to have serious holes in them.
I'm just trying to figure out how they got to 75.
Well, the one guy said that most of them involved the government conspiracy.
Yeah.
So they were probably just different angles
Yeah.
that of a government conspiracy. There might have been 60 of those.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a tragedy. What happened? 9 people lost their lives. The one thing I will say is that I think it will continue to fascinate people because of the circumstances around their deaths.
Yeah. I don't think we're ever really going to know.
No, unless that secret base is uncovered.
Or my time travel machine finally works. I go back,
And warn
them, and come back and tell you guys.
But then you still wouldn't know what happened because you've warned them, thereby altering history.
Oh, yeah. I'd have to sit there and watch it happen.
Yeah. And that would just be cruel.
Yeah. And that'd probably
And then
mess
you
up my time machine anyway.
And you would die as well because it'd be like -30 and you time traveled in your Tommy Bahamas.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'd rethink this whole
Yeah.
process.
But anyway, that is it for our episode on the Dyatlov Pass. Just what a mystery.
Oh,
What an absolute mystery. You know, I often subscribe to that theory that the obvious answer is most often correct. And I think if you were thinking about the obvious answer, it has something to do with nature, right? Snow, avalanche, slab avalanche, whatever you want to call it. That probably is along the lines of the most obvious answer. But again, there are just a lot of holes in that one.
And the fact that no one's really come out definitively and say, this is it, until recently.
They also haven't come out definitively.
Yeah, that too.
But how can anybody come out definitively and say anything?
I don't think they ever can.
Number one, they weren't there.
Right.
So all people can do is try to recreate the conditions or the model of what that night was like.
I feel bad for their families.
Because they don't know.
They don't know.
They have no idea what happened to their loved ones.
They just thought their loved ones were going on this big time adventurous outing, and we're going to come back with these amazing photos and maybe some science data and things like that, to never see or hear from them again.
We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Hannah at Princeton. I just finished listening to your Katie Poyer case, and I'm actually from near the area of Moose Lake. I'm from Duluth, which is not too far away. And granted, I was probably like 7 or 8 when it happened, but due to all the new laws and stuff that concerned what happened with Katie, ironically, having worked at several gas stations myself, sorry, I'm at work, there's a lot of noise around me, they actually implemented the rule of not ever working alone, partially because of Katie and her being kidnapped, abducted, however you want to look at that. And also, I briefly worked at the sex offender program that's in Moose Lake. I don't think it's actually too far away from where she was kidnapped. And yeah, I just wanted to let you know that that was a pretty terrifying case. I don't really remember a whole lot of it, but I do know that we discussed it when I started working at the Quick Trip near my house. So just thought you'd like to know that. And I can't remember what else I was going to say. So thank you. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Awesome. Great voicemail from Tana. I think she recently sent us some stuff in on the mailbag.
That's awesome.
So we appreciate that. And, I think I've mentioned it before, but I did manage gas stations like in the 90s. And for the most part, unless I was at a specific station, there was one person working.
Yeah.
Overnight, there was always one person working. It would have been hard to have been profitable having two people on every shift. Now, it seems like a lot of the gas stations are bigger nowadays. They have got more food, so there's more people needed to kind of do certain things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But some of it could be for safety as well.
That's when you were known as the gas man.
The gas man.
Yeah, one of the reasons.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. My name's Caroline. I'm from Oceanside, California. I was just calling because I was just listening to your podcast right now on the Radley Murdoch case, and I heard you guys bring up about something about 20 pounds of weed. Yes, that is a lot because usually weed goes by grams, and from grams it goes up to ounces. So say you get half an ounce. That's usually a small little bag. Depends. You can put it in a little container, a half-size container, or if you get a whole ounce, that's a whole small decent-sized container. Probably maybe a whole ounce is about 28 G's. Yeah. So half an ounce is about 14 G's. So 20 pounds, oh gosh, that's a lot. I don't know exactly how many grams that is. I can't tell you. And I can tell you it is a lot of money because with pounds, you have to put it into bags for that. So yeah, it's a lot of money and it's a lot of weed. But just wanted to let you guys know. Love you guys' podcast. Keep your guys' time ticking. Have a great one.
All right. So we learned a lot about weed right there.
Yeah. Things have changed from the old nickel dime bag and quarter bag. Now it's into grams and pounds. And
oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
And
I do know that there are 16 ounces in a pound. I do know that.
Yeah.
So when she's saying half an ounce is a bag, a little baggie or something. Yeah. Either way, 20 pounds is a boatload of weed.
That's a couple backpacks full.
Yeah. Well, it's like two very big twin babies.
Yeah.
If you figure if you had two 10-pound twins,
yeah,
that's how much weed you're carrying around.
A lot of weed, man.
That's a lot.
That's a pretty healthy supply.
Yeah, it is. But our listeners, they know a lot of different things, and they school us.
And they just schooled us.
They did.
Thank you.
All right. So appreciate the voicemails. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
On Pluto TV. Unravel the mysteries on shows like CSI and Criminal Minds, or follow the clues in Blue Bloods and NCIS. With thousands of free crime movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is the true home of crime. Download the Pluto TV app and start streaming now on live channels and on demand.
You better run for your life.
Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.